Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some poetry that has interested me as of late. And today's poem is all about human connection in the present. I am referring to Now by Robert Browning. For those who don't know, Robert Browning was a British author who lived in the 1800s, one of the Victorian school poets who focused on nature and sort of making social critiques of society, focusing on mythology sometimes and even folklore. He wrote one poem about the Pied Piper of Hamelin, that classic story about one of a rat catcher who is called upon to catch rats, but when the town doesn't pay him, he ends up like transporting the children out of the town. And more gruesome instances of that story, the children are murdered. So very rough time, and very weird, sort of interesting, sort of fairy folktale that we've shared as a culture. And he was also Robert Browning was also married to Elizabeth Browning, who was another big poet in her own right, and she was even considered for the poet laureate position of the United Kingdom, but was chosen or bypassed in favor of another poem. So pretty interesting family going on there. And he was also somewhat of a liberal person, which shows up in some of his works, and some of the poetry that he wrote. I've heard of him before, particularly with his poem "My Last Duchess," which I wanted to talk about, but a lot of his poems are really hard to parse, and it requires a lot more in-depth discussion than I can possibly do with my Poetry Thursday videos. I do recommend that you go check out more of his works. But without further ado, let's talk about Now. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. Now. Out of your whole life give but one moment, all of your life that has gone before, all to come after it. So you ignore, so you make perfect the present, condense in a rapture of rage for perfection's endowment, thought and feeling and soul and sense, merged in a moment which gives me at last you around me for once, you beneath me, above me, me. Sure that despite of time future, time past, this tick of our lifetimes, one moment you love me. How long such suspension may linger? Ah, sweet, the moment eternal, just that and no more. When ecstasy's utmost we clutch at the core, while cheeks burn, arms open, eyes shut and lips meet. And so that was Now by Robert Browning. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit worth talking about in this poem. In terms of narrative, I don't think there's a straight narrative in this poem, but there is an idea that Robert Browning is talking about, which is human connection. Or if you made it interpret this more directly, it's about sex, getting it on, as they say. Robert Browning is talking about being with a person in a moment, enjoying love, enjoying being all around them and touching and feeling and all that good stuff that comes with a very close relationship with the person that you love. But the main idea of this poem seems to be being present, being there in the moment and not focusing too much on the future. They say, out of your whole life, give but one moment, making it initially clear, like what Robert Browning, what he's trying to say there. All of your life has gone before, all to come after it. So you ignore, so you make perfect the present, condense in a rapture of rage for perfection's endowment. So what he's saying is being there, present, not thinking about anything else but me and you and the time that we get to spend with one another. I do like how Robert Browning also uses alliteration in this poem. Make perfect the present, he's there, and in a rapture of rage. He really uses words pretty well here. And he does ask a question later in the poem. He says, how long such suspension may linger? Ah, sweet, the moment eternal, just that and no more. And what he's saying is that, we wonder like how long this moment with our loved ones may last. And they say the moment eternal, which really isn't an answer, just that and no more. Like that, how long is a moment eternal? Like it's brief, but it seems to be eternal. So kind of a oxymoron there or something like that. And he's just saying we got to be there, present, like not thinking about the past or not thinking about if this is going to go anywhere. We just have to be with one another and enjoy that little time that we're able to, and make the most of it. Almost as if the question of like how long will this last is unimportant. If you think too much about that, you're not going to be able to enjoy what's going on right there. And then at the end of the poem, he says, when ecstasy's utmost we clutch at the core, while cheeks burn, arms open, eyes shut, and lips meet. That moment of connection, that love, that the sex that I presume Robert Browning is talking about. It could just be human connection, but given that the Victorian poets in particular were very horny men, often, you can probably see that they're getting at sex, at describing that great sensation that comes with connecting and being able to share that love with another person. And I really like this poem. It really drew me because it does get at a lot of the stuff that I think about. And, being someone who was so enmeshed in psychology, has a psychology background, like one of the humanist psychologists in particular, always urge you to be in the here and now, be mindful of the present, not just when it comes to your love life, but really everything. Because if you're too busy dwelling on the past or too, anxious about the future, that's not going to be very helpful for you. And so, this is great for your love life, but it's also just great knowledge, a great philosophy to have in general. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on Now by Robert Browning. A pretty solid poem that is worth reading, and I do think some of his other poems are really fun to read as well. I'll put a link to it in the description, but go ahead and search, find some more Robert Browning. Share what maybe you might have found in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Let's have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about Robert Browning if they don't already know, or this poem if they're curious, or even just Poetry Thursday if they want to get in that routine. But until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and here and now moments. Farewell.